A retired colonel with decades of strategic planning experience is calling the Pentagon's war with Iran a catastrophic miscalculation. The architects of American power are repeating every mistake he warned them about 20 years ago. And this time, the cost won't be measured in billions, it will reshape the global order itself. The Iran conflict that erupted in late February has already consumed over $200 billion in requested military spending. The United States launched nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours, eliminated Iran's supreme leader, and claimed victory multiple times. Yet here we are in late April, trapped in a naval blockade with no clear exit strategy, watching oil prices destabilize global markets while Iran refuses to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The question isn't whether America won the initial battle. It's whether anyone in the Pentagon understood what happens after the missiles stop flying.
This is where Douglas Macgregor's warnings become impossible to ignore. A former tank commander and strategic planner who briefed Donald Rumsfeld before the Iraq invasion, Macgregor has spent 2 decades arguing that the Pentagon designs wars for the opening act but never plans the final scene. In early 2002, he walked into Central Command headquarters and told General Tommy Franks that Baghdad could fall with 15,000 troops. When asked about Phase 4, the post-war planning, his answer was chilling. We won't need it. He was catastrophically wrong about Iraq, and that failure taught him something the Pentagon still refuses to learn. The current Iran operation follows an eerily familiar script. Overwhelming firepower in the initial strike, decapitation of leadership, declarations of mission accomplished. Then reality sets in. Iran didn't collapse. The regime appointed a new supreme leader within days. The Revolutionary Guard adapted. The closure of Hormuz triggered global supply chain chaos that no amount of military might can reverse with bombs. Every bridge America destroys, every power plant reduced to rubble, pushes a negotiated settlement further out of reach. Macgregor's central criticism cuts to the bone. American war planning is designed to satisfy 4-star generals and defense contractors, not to achieve sustainable political outcomes. The Pentagon builds massive forward operating bases, maintains over 700 installations across 80 countries, and spends an estimated $70 billion annually just on overseas infrastructure. This isn't a defense posture, it's an empire maintenance system. And empires don't plan exit strategies, they plan expansion. The Iran war exposes the fundamental delusion. The United States is fighting thousands of miles from its supply lines, while Iran operates on home terrain. Every drone strike requires a logistics chain stretching across oceans. Every naval vessel in the blockade needs fuel, food, and ammunition flowing from bases that are themselves vulnerable to retaliation. Iran fired missiles at American installations in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. A frigate was sunk near Sri Lanka. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed, and Pentagon officials now estimate it could take 6 months just to clear the mines after a ceasefire. Meanwhile, the political theater continues. Trump claims Iran is ready to negotiate. Iran denies talks are happening. A 2-week ceasefire brokered by Pakistan collapsed when Iran refused to separate the conflict from Israel's war in Lebanon. The administration seized an Iranian cargo ship and called it enforcement. Iran called it a truce violation and launched retaliatory drone strikes. The Senate has rejected war powers restrictions 5 times this year. No one in Washington is willing to admit that victory was never defined because victory was never achievable. This is what Macgregor means by terrible war planning. The Pentagon excels at destruction, but fails at construction. It can eliminate a government, but cannot build a replacement. It can close a strait, but cannot reopen it. It can win every tactical engagement and still lose the strategic war. Because the plan was never about creating a stable post-conflict Middle East, it was about demonstrating dominance. And dominance without a political endgame is just expensive chaos. The cost is staggering and growing. $18 billion in direct military expenses by mid-March, a request for $200 billion more. Arab allies have absorbed over $120 billion in economic damage. Iran estimates its own losses between $300 billion and $1 trillion. Global fertilizer supplies are disrupted.
Food security in the developing world is threatened. Energy markets are in turmoil. And for what? A new supreme leader in Tehran who is more hardline than his predecessor. A regime that survived the decapitation strike and emerged claiming vindication. Macgregor's warnings about infrastructure targeting reveal the next phase of this disaster. When Trump threatens to destroy power plants and bridges, he's not talking about military strategy. He's talking about state destruction. Turning Iran into a failed state doesn't make America safer. It creates a vacuum that will be filled by forces far less predictable than the current regime. It transforms a manageable adversary into a generational problem. And it signals to every other nation that American military power is no longer a tool of policy, it's a hammer looking for nails. The pattern is unmistakable. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, now Iran. Every conflict follows the same arc. Initial shock and awe, rapid tactical success, then years of inconclusive fighting, spiraling costs, and eventual withdrawal under conditions worse than before the war began. The Pentagon never learns because the system isn't designed to learn. It's designed to perpetuate itself. More bases mean more contracts. More threats mean bigger budgets. More wars mean more promotions for officers who play the bureaucratic game better than they fight. What makes the Iran situation particularly dangerous is the absence of any realistic diplomatic framework. The Trump administration entered office promising maximum pressure. Sanctions were reimposed. Oil exports were targeted. Nuclear negotiations collapsed. When protests erupted in Iran in January, Trump saw an opening for regime change and ordered the largest military buildup since the Iraq invasion. The assumption was that a weakened Iran would either collapse from internal pressure or accept American terms. Instead, Iran chose defiance, and now both sides are locked in a confrontation that neither can win, but neither can afford to lose. The global implications are profound.
NATO allies are increasingly skeptical of American strategy. European nations are caught between supporting an ally and protecting their own economic interests. China and Russia are watching carefully, noting that American military power can disrupt but cannot stabilize. Every day the Strait of Hormuz remains closed is a day that erodes confidence in American leadership. Every failed negotiation is proof that overwhelming force doesn't translate into political leverage. Macgregor's critique extends beyond Iran. He argues that the entire American posture is unsustainable. 750 bases in 80 countries. Over $100 billion in annual overseas costs. A force structure designed for Cold War threats being applied to asymmetric conflicts. The military can topple governments but cannot build nations. It can destroy infrastructure but cannot govern populations. It can project power globally but cannot secure lasting political outcomes. This isn't a strategy. It's strategic drift wrapped in overwhelming firepower. The failure to plan for Phase 4, for what comes after the missiles, is not an oversight. It's a feature of a system that rewards short-term thinking and punishes long-term accountability. Generals retire before the consequences of their plans become clear. Politicians move on to new crises. Contractors collect their payments, and the next generation of leaders inherits a mess they didn't create but are expected to manage. The cycle repeats because the incentives never change. In the case of Iran, we are now in the most dangerous phase. The initial strikes have failed to achieve their political objectives. The regime has not collapsed. The population has not risen up to install a friendly government. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed, and Iran shows no sign of capitulating. Trump has gone from declaring victory to threatening civilizational destruction. This is what happens when tactical success meets strategic failure. The only options left are escalation or humiliation, and neither leads anywhere good. What Macgregor understands and the Pentagon refuses to accept is that military force is a means, not an end. You can destroy an enemy's capacity to fight without destroying their will to resist. You can occupy territory without controlling the population. You can achieve every operational objective and still lose the war. Because war is ultimately about politics, and politics is about people, and people don't behave like targets on a map. The lesson of Iraq was that removing a dictator doesn't automatically create democracy.
The lesson of Afghanistan was that 20 years of occupation doesn't automatically create a stable government. The lesson of Libya was that regime change without reconstruction creates chaos that spreads across regions. And now, Iran is teaching the same lesson again. You cannot bomb your way to a political settlement. You can only bomb your way to a more expensive, more complicated version of the same problem. The tragedy is that this was all predictable. Macgregor predicted it. Strategists warned about it. The intelligence community assessed it. But the Pentagon planned the war anyway because the system is not designed to prevent bad wars. It's designed to execute whatever war the political leadership demands. And when those wars fail, the people who planned them suffer no consequences. They write memoirs, join think tanks, and advise the next generation of leaders who will make the same mistakes. The Iran conflict is not an aberration. It's the logical conclusion of a defense establishment that has lost the ability to think strategically. It can plan operations, but not campaigns. It can win battles, but not wars. It can project power, but not purpose. And until the fundamental incentives change, until failure has consequences, and success is measured by political outcomes rather than tactical victories, the pattern will continue. The next war will be planned just as poorly as this one. The next intervention will lack the same political endgame. The next crisis will be met with the same combination of overwhelming force and strategic incoherence. Macgregor's message is uncomfortable because it implicates not just the generals, but the entire architecture of American power. The bases, the budgets, the bureaucracy, the political class that funds it all. Admitting that the war planning is terrible means admitting that the system produces terrible results by design. It means acknowledging that American military dominance has become a liability rather than an asset when it's wielded without strategic clarity. It means accepting that the next 20 years could look a lot like the last 20. Expensive, inconclusive conflicts that leave America weaker, not stronger. The real test of leadership is not whether you can start a war. It's whether you can end one on terms that advance your interests. Trump can threaten to destroy Iran's civilization. He can impose blockades and seize ships and launch strikes. But none of that brings him closer to a deal that reopens the strait, stabilizes oil markets, and allows both sides to claim something resembling victory. Because the Pentagon never planned for that outcome. They planned for destruction, not resolution. And now, we're all living with the consequences of war planning that confuses military action with strategic success. I am a journalist, and this is my independent analysis. This is just my point of view that I'm presenting. It may be wrong, but it is my own perspective. I want you to share your point of view in the comments as well.